Welcome back, bird nerds. I'm Grant. I'm a bird nerd. This is the Bird Emergency. The Bird Emergency is a show where I get to speak to all sorts of marvellous people about rare and endangered birds, the projects to research them so we can find out what they need for protection. And today the focus is on citizen science, and I'm bringing back friend of the show. But first, let me acknowledge that my fat ass is sitting here in the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people. I'm in Melbourne, Naarm, in Australia. But let me bring in friend of the show, Dr Clare Hawkins. Hello, Claire.
Hello, I'm in Nipaluna. I'm the Palawa people, the Muwanina people. Yeah, really great to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you back. And, it seems to be the case that since we all got over COVID and things kind of got back to normal, it's been really hard to actually find time to talk to people that I've wanted to get updates from. For those who don't know, Claire's pretty busy. University of Tasmania, yes.
Adjunct researcher, yeah.
Yes.
Hooked onto there, I get an office there, which is great. Yeah.
Bookend Trust, which I'll get you to talk a little bit about shortly, and Nature Trackers,
which is within the Bookend Trust,
which is one of the sort of main projects or interest areas, isn't it? It's really a division. I mean, I hate all the corporate speak, but it sits within Bookend Trust, and Nature Trackers is pretty much a citizen science facilitating body. Is it a network? I mean, tell me.
Well, we're evolving. We've got 3 project happenings. We started off with Wedgie, and now we've got another couple which we can potentially touch on. And they're all about involving the public in finding out the status of these threatened species and potentially threatened species in Tasmania. So the overall conservation status. And obviously there's an enormous number of conservation bodies that are potentially interested in that. They're all doing restoration and other things to try and address these issues. So we're sort of massively working on like as much collaboration as possible with organizations as well as individuals. But yes, I guess my role is to coordinate all of that interest into something as scientifically rigorous as we can possibly achieve.
Well, let's start with where we're Wedgie, but let me first let people know that if you want to get the history about how Claire got into where we're Wedgie and sort of the progression of Claire's early career, you can go back into the Bird Emergency archives, both on YouTube and in the podcast, and you can find that out. I don't even remember the episode number, but I think it might have been number 13, actually, Claire. I think it was round about there. So it's way back in the archives. So we won't go over all of that, but let's talk about the genesis of where we're Wedgie, and particularly tell us why it was needed, and then how you developed a project out of the need.
Oh my goodness, the need. You're going to have to control me. I could go on and on. I was working as threatened species zoologist for the government. And so my responsibility was for over 190 different threatened animal species. And roughly a quarter of my time was spent addressing issues around Tasmanian wedge-tailed eagles, which are listed as endangered. Like one of the issues they face a number of threats, but one of them is all about their nests. They're super sensitive to disturbance in Tasmania, and so anything within 1,000 meters of the nest during the breeding season, which the sensitive period is about 7 months, any activity around there that's a bit out of the ordinary or a bit noisy or a bit strongly visual has the potential to mess with breeding. So that's really constraining. I mean, it can mean that there's some really effective conservation in the area around these nests because they need somewhere super undisturbed. But of course, people want to do things, and so we'd always be trying to find a way forward. That was huge, and then there were a whole lot of other threatening issues as well. And there were people spending an enormous amount of money, like companies trying to avoid or being regulated to avoid these impacts. But there wasn't any formal monitoring going on to see if any of it was working. And I was also very aware of that being a general issue, that we were kind of blindly giving this advice and hoping it would work without knowing if it was effective. So that was the need that was like really getting me worried.
It's really important in that money for conservation is so scarce to begin with, and it's also very difficult to get corporates to be happy to spend money in compliance, even though as we've talked about 1,000 different ways, that the laws are sort of inadequate. But even if we want that sector of shareholders, what am I saying? Not shareholders. What do we call them?
Stakeholders.
Stakeholders in developing and using, shall we say, the natural environment and endangered habitats encompassing endangered species. We need to be sure that, or as sure as we can be, that the money that they spend is effective
Massively
in either protecting or reducing impact. And I guess it's not really thought of as being a key part of the activities of any researchers and conservation groups. That,
well, I think as an undergraduate, like Conservation 101 is like, you see there's a problem, you find out the stuff that is enough to list the animal and go, this animal is threatened and it needs looking after. And then you probably don't have enough information to be sure about what the issues are. So you try a thing, and at the same time you monitor to see if it's working. And if it's not working, and you also monitor whether you're effectively changing the level of threat. If it's not working, you adjust it. That is just like absolute Conservation 101. But trying to find the funding and the action for that is incredibly difficult. So I've been thinking about it for a long time before I started Wedgie.
Well, you'll see the bird behind me, Claire.
Yeah.
One of Australia's most critically endangered birds, the swift parrot, last assessed in 2018, and people are only really guessing of what the actual population
I would say
is.
Well, yeah, I mean, they are super difficult to, I'm fairly across them. They were another thing I was very involved with when I was working in government, and still very in touch with the people involved. There is a lot of really good, really hard science happening on those, and there is some good funding for that. I would say they are super hard to count, those species. And so like the stuff that we're doing, it's primarily looking at the decline. Trying to get numbers is horrendous. There is, as with the nature trackers, there is ongoing monitoring of the trends of the swift parrot, and you will have heard they're going down. And they're
down. Actually, I was just reading on, what's today? Wednesday. I was just reading on Monday. I went back and read all of the earlier plans, and then I had a look at whatever I could find about population estimates now, and it's not looking fab, and certainly there's work going on, but it is such a difficult species. One, it's so hard to recognise because it's often in a mixed flock with other lorikeets. Certainly here on the
I think in Tassie, such a distinctive call, and they're pretty they're pretty full.
Yeah, but in a mixed flock, the problem with them in the mainland is that where they're popping up in places where people don't expect them, and if you're not experienced, if you're not familiar with the swift parrot, you're just going to go, oh, lorikeets.
Which,
and there's two different problems anyway. What you need to do in Tasmania is a little bit different to what needs to happen here on the mainland to support the breeding population when after they've done their business in Tasmania. So
but I would say that one of the motivations for Wedgie was working very closely with my colleague Matt Webb, who was initially working in government and then worked with ANU, and he was delivering the information, which he was getting with a small number of expert birders, just each year, monitoring to see the numbers, and also really tying that to the key factors, which was availability of flowering blue gums that were near tree hollows or a few other species. And he was delivering that information. And I mean, it's a classic thing, but it's always so gutting for a scientist. You're like, I've given them the information. They say they want to do something about this, but they're not acting on it.
That's right, but they're not doing anything. It's in the 10-year plan. It's in the 10-year plan. That's right.
And I was so aware. I'd been sort of told before that, very often when you're saying what the government is deciding, it's a reflection of what the government perceives that the community is concerned about. And okay, there might be a sector of the community that are really concerned about this, but if the government's not acting, there's going to be a factor there of perhaps not having reached enough of the community, having not really got them in the gut. And so for me, that was a really strong reason to involve larger numbers of people, even people that weren't perhaps really, full-on birders, but just anyone that kind of was quite fond of eagles.
Which is really one of the strengths of the whole Wedgie approach. Tell us about the genesis and the design of Wedgie, and I'll just try and find the where on here the numbers are of how many people have been involved. It's amazing.
If you go to take part, you'll see the bookings.
There we are.
We started off and we had some really good establishment funding, and we involved like 60 schools in the first year. So we managed to reach an awful lot of people. It's hard to get funding like that regularly, but that outreach in the first year really improved awareness. So those numbers, 1,420, that's the number of people that are receiving the emails. 798, that's the number of people that have signed up for the app. I would say a fair few are like, oh, I thought I could just report the eagles that I'm just casually seeing, and now you're telling me I have to do something a bit more formal. So there's a bit of that, but there is certainly a lot of people that have been involved. 63, that's the number. So we that's a bit more technical. We've divided up the whole of Tassie into survey squares. It's every third square. We invite people to choose any of those squares to do their 6 10-minute surveys. And that 63 is the number of squares that have been booked for 2 days for this year. And we try and achieve 100 each year. Last year we only achieved 85 total. There were a few cancellations, but still desperately trying to get more bookings right now because we've got our second weekend coming up.
I thought I was sharing this screen. There we are. So
yes, that's the result so far.
That's right. So that's how. So it's not every square inch of Tassie is covered. It's representative squares, and people volunteer to go and do a survey over 2 weekends in May.
Yeah, they can just do one morning if they want to. If they're going to go down to Melaleuca, as you can see down in the southwest there, the stars that went down there, they went last weekend. There we go. And they did 2 days in one weekend, and that was brilliant.
Well, make it. There we are.
Yeah, and if you click on that, you'll see what they found. If you just tap on that square, the red one,
There we are. Birds identified with high confidence. Wedge-tailed Eagle, 2 times, and white-bellied sea eagle. Other birds identified at lower levels of confidence. So
we give the option. It's a bit unusual, and we'll still be reviewing whether we think this is the best way, but I like it because we're trying to reach people who don't always feel super confident. We give them the option to say, look, I don't know what that was, but it was some kind of big bird of prey, and I really want to tell you I saw something. And I think we, for some analyses, that will still be completely useful. And it just means that people don't feel really forced to go, oh, it was definitely a wedgie, you know. But I mean, there's different characters. Some people always want to say that, and some people want to be super unconfident. So we'll review the efficacy of that. But I just wanted people not to feel like, oh, I don't know anything, therefore I shouldn't take part.
Now, here we go. Is this a zero hero result, Claire? Square 910.
Very small screen, so you have to read that one out.
Sorry, Square 910, which is
so the green one there.
Yeah. Birds identified with high confidence. No birds confidently identified.
Yes, and I know the person that did that. He's a superb birder, and he will have been very, he will have given it an extremely good look. And that is absolutely as useful information as having seen things, because of course if we saw eagles in every single square it would be kind of really confusing and we wouldn't know what to do with that.
Now, Peter Mackay, Peter, you have to remind me again. I can't remember if it was Mackay or Mackay. I saw 2 wedge-tails on the side of the road near Pemberton last month. They didn't move as I drove past. Amazing birds.
Yes, and you really get it. The size of them comes across so much when you see them on the ground like that. I have people telling me stories like that all the time, particularly if they took off and, went over your windscreen. You get the feel of the wings. I do like to point out that on average the Tasmanian wedge-tailed eagle is larger than any other wedge-tailed eagle.
Now I've just clicked on Square 1119, Claire, and I was looking for this so that I could go.
Yes, you got a yellow one.
Yes, so birds identified with high confidence, sulphur-crested cockatoo. So there we go, and that was on both days of the weekend.
So we do all raptors, and we also decided to throw in corellas and sulphur-crested cockatoos. I was kind of interested in just putting in something else because you don't see raptors all the time, and people, although I go on and on and on about how wonderful zero heroes are, people do tend to feel a bit disappointed. And so I thought, well, let's throw these in so that there's a good chance each person will see something in their square. And also there's this perception, and I think it's because they move around a lot within their territories. There's this perception that sulphur-crested cockatoos in particular are on the up. And so it was like a genuinely interesting question that might reach a different group of people to involve them as well. So we just bolted them into, and it's not too much. It's not too distracting an extra thing to put people off the raptor job.
So I'm just going. You've basically answered this part of the discussion, but on the naturetrackers.au site, that's where you want to go to check out.
It used to be .com, but we've taken away the .com. We're all new and funky, and we've just naturetrackers.au. I
hope you've still got the .com pointing to this one.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Good. So basically, I want to talk a little bit more about why particularly do you think the Tasmanian subspecies of the wedge-tailed eagle, why is it less tolerant of disturbance. Like I'm making an assumption there. I don't know if people have done as much close monitoring within a kilometre, within 1,000 metres, but I'm aware. I've seen wedge-tailed eagles nests where they seem to be going quite happily about their business, being
Definitely
only a couple of 100 metres away from, schools and ovals and roads and farm access tracks. And
yeah, it's a I can't give you any authoritative answer. I think it might be what they used to. Perhaps on the mainland, they just slowly became. There's an idea that if they're born into quite a disturbed environment, they might be a lot more tolerant of it. And so, if generally mainland Australian wedge-tailed eagles were being a bit more disturbed, then obviously a lot of them, it might have all gone pear-shaped for them, but a few might have survived and they'd have tolerated it. And it's just a much bigger area, so they could have sort of dealt with that perturbation. We haven't had that level of disturbance here, and if we did, it just might be a bit problematic because there's just not so many to start with.
Now, Peter's popped a question in here.
Ah.
Any photos of their nests? Now, I would say, being very intolerant of disturbances within 1 kilometre, you would hope that people are not going out there to take photos of Tasmanian wedge-tailed eagle nests.
Certainly not during the breeding season. We're sort of like the sensitive period we'd consider from the kind of risk assessment period when they're deciding which of their perhaps typically 3 nests in their territory they're going to go for this year. So yeah, from about June till about could be February or even later sometimes. So all that time, I wouldn't go near the nest. Obviously, there are some experts who are really familiar with exactly what freaks out these birds, and there's a certain skill to it. But you have to really, really know this particular subspecies to do that with any confidence. And you can do all sorts of things with hides, and what their eyes are like. You can't really fool them. And it was funny because when I was first in Tasmania, obviously I'm not originally from Tassie, and it was sort of hard to believe how incredibly sensitive they were. But I was lucky enough in preparation for all of this. I did a Churchill fellowship, and one of the places I went to was Hungary, where they have imperial eagles, and they have a whole lot of complicated threats going on as well. And one of them is exactly this, and they were actually more prone to give them a buffer of 1.5 kilometers. And they were absolutely the same. And they'd been trying to experiment and learn more about the birds by putting cameras up. And just talked about how a camera anywhere near the eagle, even if it was tiny, the bird had just been looking at it like, and they wouldn't like to settle in a nest where there was just anything odd.
Anything that they didn't put there, I would imagine, would be the rule.
But what you would say is the birds are really variable, which does sort of suggest that they might become more tolerant, but it's just a really delicate operation trying to figure out how to get them more tolerant. And for example, on farms, you will meet farmers who are quite busily kind of cruising around their farms, perhaps well within this area, but they're doing something that they always do all year round. They're not doing anything odd. And so the eagles have had time to kind of look at that, possibly for years, and gone, okay, I see how this works. I'm comfortable with that before nesting.
Is the survey data indicating the health of the population, Claire?
So whether they're declining or not, or whether they're recovering.
Or whether it's stable, or whether they're holding their own.
Yeah. So we've got 6 years so far. I think. What should you go to? Go to latest news.
Latest news. So just in the news section. There we go. Latest news.
And looking good. That one on the top right there.
There we are. Looking good. 4 years of rapid data.
Down, so that we haven't popped in the the data for last year yet, but just keep cruising. Yeah, there you'll see. So we've got another. I can't remember where it's at. Yeah, we've got another dot coming up from 2023. That there was a bit of a delay on that, but that's coming up. Basically, you know, you can see it's bobbing around. So far, there's no indication of any like concentrated up or down. But these things, you know, unless something incredibly dramatic is going to happen, it's going to be a delicate thing. So everyone gets together, and you know, it's been unbearable in the first couple of years because they're like, what have you found? And it's like, well, we have found one dot. And so, you know, we'll become more and more confident about what this means over the years. And once we've got about 10 years, then we'll really start, then we'll really have so we've got one dot to add from last year, and then we've got a dot coming up from this year, and it's going to start looking more and more clear. But what I can say is there's nothing dramatic going on. And if it is stable, that's certainly encouraging. But then what we need to know is it stable and near ground zero, or is it stable and they're really, you know, there's plenty of them. And we're getting a PhD student to start to try and make sense from these data. And also, well, they'll have to do some really imaginative, clever stuff, and also from James Pay's tracking data as well.
Okay, now I want to talk about that and the bioacoustic work in a minute, but let's explain this graph a little bit. The
Sure.
index of Tasmanian wedge-tailed eagle abundance, and I'll just read what's below. The graph shows the index of abundance calculated from the Wedgie surveys for 2019 to 2022, and as Claire noted, the 2023
Still to be added.
Will be added sometime soon. Note that we don't yet know how this index translates to the actual population size. It just means that we can see how that size is changing over the years. More on figuring out population size below, and might talk about that in relation to James's work as well. So this highlights a problem, but one of the really valuable things about citizen science is that it's very difficult for researchers on their own to be able to do longitudinal studies like this, that for this data to be meaningful, with wedge-tailed eagles being such long-lived birds, this study needs to be 15, 20, 25, 30, 50 years long. Now, I'm going to be surprised that if in 50 years' time you're coordinating Where Wedgie for nature trackers. So through involving so many people, and we had a look at the numbers before, the number of people who are getting the newsletter and the people checking out the app and the people booking squares, you've turned a hardcore group of maybe half a dozen researchers into several hundred people who are willing to help out and learn the skills to continue the work. And of course, they'll be supported by new researchers as people finish their undergrads, do new PhD studies and become postdocs, and as government departments are reorganised and budgets are thrown around. So it's a great opportunity, but it does highlight that it's very challenging to do this work without involving the community.
Oh, I mean, I've been thinking about it for so long before I got into citizen science, because yeah, most funding is short term, and so you just can't rely on it. You know, sometimes you might have some, and then woohoo, let's kind of build on this like little facet that we can add to the overall project. But we needed to design something that was incredibly low cost, that would just tick over really long term. It's still a bit scary. It's still a bit dependent on me. And at the moment, there's no funding. So if I kind of fell over, I couldn't like pay someone else. but working on that. But there are quite a few organisations who are being really great in kind of spreading the word. I would say the biggest job now, apart from what everyone else is doing, is that communication and spreading the word. So thanks for that, Grant.
Well, I mean, as you know, I'm a huge fan of the project, and I wish I was in a situation to every May to come down and sort of be involved. But the best thing I can do is talk about it and hope other people who hear about it will, maybe go to Tassie and jump into Where We're Wedgie and the King Island surveys and maybe any of the other.
Yeah.
I mean, Tassie's got some really critical issues, and you've got one university. I'm assuming the Tasmanian government is equally as supportive as the federal government. Like last night, speaking of zeros, that's the amount of new money that went to endangered species in the federal government budget that was delivered yesterday. So it's a super challenging environment. And as you said, unless it's a pain point in the community, governments are not going to throw money at these things. So it totally relies on the goodwill and the private capital of people who want to be involved.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, yeah, as I say, organisations, including the government, are definitely trying to help spread the word. I mean, they've been great on sharing the posts, and certain members of staff from all sorts of organisations, including the Tasmanian government, have contributed, I believe, their own time. So there is support there, but yeah, the funding is a different deal.
Yeah, I mean, you would think. I mean, you've got a program that has legs. Right? It's obviously got support. It's fair to say, isn't it, Claire, that it's proving to be valuable?
Yes. So central to the team is a really great wildlife statistician, and we talked very hard with her and with Nick Mooney, who's a raptor specialist, the raptor specialist in Tassie, and a bunch of other people, but centrally Joe Potts, the wildlife statistician, is this likely to work? Yeah. And she's very comfortable with the quality of the data we're getting. I think, to keep absolutely everyone happy, we will keep reviewing things. Like, people worry about, people's ability to identify the different species, but we do have people taking photos regularly, and also that kind of thing's not likely to change massively over the years. Even if people are making some errors, it shouldn't be something that sort of massively changes to indicate, a confusing change. So yeah, she's really comfortable, and it's coming out really consistently, and we're getting the buy-in. People are doing it. It is fiddly. It's not as simple as some projects, but people are doing it, and they're doing it right. Yeah. So yeah.
And if your volunteers are coming back year after year, I think it's a fair assumption to make that the accuracy, that the reliability is going to improve, because I don't think that the only bird watching that these people are doing on these 2 weekends in May. I'm sure they are honing their Raptor ID skills over time.
Yeah, I mean, I think people do get better and better at noticing some of the subtler ones. We certainly encourage that. The weekend before the first Where We're Wedgie weekend, I was at AgFest, which, as you may guess, is a huge agricultural.
Did you buy a John Deere?
Not this time. but yeah, I mean, there's people from all walks of life, obviously mostly fairly rural, and they're all so familiar with eagles, and people will all tell you about their eagle experience. And quite often I just ask these little questions to make sure that people aren't confusing juvenile sea eagles or swamp harriers. And yeah, it's variable, but yeah, I mean, there's there's some people that just stare at them all day. They would never call themselves a birder, but they're just in love with the birds.
I think that's how so many people get started, isn't it? I mean, whether it's an eagle or a pelican or something, seeing those birds soaring overhead.
Totally.
And of course, plenty of poems and songs written about eagles, no doubt about it. I wonder how many flags eagles are on.
Oh, around the world, it's incredible. Yeah. Hungary was one of them. Yeah.
And how many bank ads nowadays feature raptors? That's pretty crazy. Now let's before we move on, Claire, it's too late for people from the mainland or from overseas to be contacting you to head into Tassie.
No, they could do. No, because it's not this weekend; it's next weekend. So bookings finish. I mean, it depends how hasty people are. But the bookings close on the Wednesday before the weekend, and the weekend it's the Friday, Saturday, Sundays. That's the 24th, 25th, 26th. So, oh God, it's like the 20th or something, the last day that you can book. 22nd is the last day you can book.
Okay, so that's what, Tuesday next week or Wednesday?
Wednesday.
Next week? Mm-hmm. Wednesday next week. Okay. What does somebody need to be able to book a square? What skills do they need? What equipment or what essentials does somebody need to put in their backpack if they're going to jump on the ferry or get on a plane? It
does really help if they've got a pair of binoculars. If they hate technology, they can enter all the information on data sheets, but otherwise we've got an app. So it's quite good if they just get a little bit familiar with that. It's wonderful if they've got a camera, because that kind of adds to the credibility of the whole project if people take photos of what they've seen. And then they just need to, so because they're choosing a square, they can choose, if they don't know anything about the square, then it's probably best to choose somewhere that's got named roads on it, so you can just do it all by the roadside. If you live in Tasmania, then you can maybe have a chat with the landholders and so forth. But yeah, just make sure that you and your fellow, ideally you take a team of 3 of you, but lots of people do it on their own, but obviously you've got more eyes going on, and you can just, particularly if you're new to the whole thing, it's nice to have more of you involved. But yeah, I mean, if you're a super keen hiker, then wow, please go to the southwest or anywhere in the west and go for an amazing hike. But in all these cases, just make sure that you kind of know where you're going and what the risks are and all that stuff.
So if somebody wants to find out a bit more before they sort of make their decisions and book their flights,
and they absolutely should. It's definitely not one of these things that you can just find out on the day. If you're trying to figure it all out on the day, you'll just get really annoyed.
So what's the best outreach point? Through the website, or should they chase you down on Twitter or something?
Well, I mean, they're welcome to, but I mean, all the answers are on the website. Yeah, so just go to Nature Trackers and look up, or Google where we're Wedgie. But Nature Trackers means you won't get any results. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Now, I was a little bit surprised that I'll just pop this out for a minute. That when I saw that Nature Trackers was no longer .com and it was .au, and the website's all been freshened up, and I looked at projects and I saw that there is call trackers. Now, tell me about call trackers. How did that come about?
Well, the very beginning of it was again on my Churchill Fellowship. So I visited the British Trust for Ornithology in the UK, and I met this awesome birder there called Stuart Newson. And Stuart had been hired, I'm guessing maybe about a decade ago or so, to try and do the thing that people have finally nailed now, which is, setting up recorders and doing automatic recognition of diurnal birds, which is just the hardest thing. Yeah. And he really is an incredibly skilled person, but he was like, this is a big job, and I can't see it working out right now. The technology has changed and developed, and although we haven't nailed it completely in Australia, we're clearly getting there. And
the AI is pretty good, isn't it now?
Oh, I mean, I've seen Merlin working in the UK, and it's just phenomenal. It's just such fun, you know. But anyway, he tried, and then he just, when he was like, look, I'm moving on to other things, he just got a bit distracted about like, what else am I recording with these recorders? And he got really into bats. And then he also, like, in the process of getting the recognizers for the bats, he was like, well, what else is in there? Because he's such a birder. I think like his listening skills and his way of like recognizing different things is particularly attuned. And you know, most people, when they put up recorders, I think they're kind of like looking for one very particular group or species. But he was like, oh, look, this is bush crickets, and oh, this is small mammals. And he's got, I mean, it's incredible what they're picking up now and recognizing. Like this really threatened dormouse and all the rodents and shrews and all this stuff, which made me just terribly excited, because I've always been a bit excited about like dunarts, which are incredibly hard to find, and I just feel they could fizzle out and we'd never know. So I was very curious about this. So that was the start. Yeah.
I think I saw him featured, I think on Springwatch, I think with a water vole or something. So,
oh, possibly. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. So it was Stuart that actually designed that booking map that we use for Wedgie, which I just saw that and I fell in love with it, because it's such an exciting way to spread out people's survey efforts, and they're not all just, you know, a classic problem with citizen science is everyone wants to go to the same place. So I thought the booking map was brilliant. And I kind of just wanted to send that message to everyone that was interested in nature trackers, that, you know, this is something that's happening worldwide and this is what other people are doing. So I managed to get some funding at that early stage to bring Stuart to Tasmania, and he had a fun time seeing things. And my colleague Jim Lovell, who was helping out a bit with teasing out all the data, which is quite a messy job on the first year, he's a radio astronomer, but was kind of like looking for alternative, interesting things. And he got talking to Stuart, and Jim's brain was just kind of blown, because radio astronomy and sound, there's an awful lot in common. And he realized that he could sort of apply some of his radio astronomical techniques to like figuring out how the distance of the bird from the detector. He got very excited, and he's been developing some amazing kit in the meantime. And as a sort of almost side issue, he said, yeah, like Jim said, I am up for creating the sort of project that Stuart is doing in the UK for bats and more here in Tasmania. So the British Trust for Ornithology, they have something called the acoustic pipeline, and we use that. And basically people can borrow, this is totally following their method. People can borrow a recorder from a library, and then they can put it out, and then they put the results recorded on the SD card, they just upload it on their computer onto the acoustic pipeline, and pretty much immediately, Wi-Fi permitting, they'll get tentative identifications of any bats. And also we decided to throw bitterns in there as well. And we hope to build on that over time.
Yeah, the matching of the audio fragments, like those the portions, is amazing. The actual software that I use to automatically process my podcast audio lets me, if I take a recording out in the park, I can highlight a magpie or a magpie lark in the recording, and my software will find like portions of audio. So it's a much grander methodology in that it's scanning a massive library of sounds, but it's basic pattern recognition for
Yeah.
the across a huge database of audio clips. It's amazing stuff, and it's so good that that BTO is, you know, letting you have access to it.
And Stuart did the basic recognizers for the Tasmanian bats while he was here, because he's just a champion at that. He's done like pretty much the whole of Europe now. And then also the BTO had masses and masses of calls for bitterns. So obviously those are European bitterns, but, you know, I mean, the similarity is very strong. We will keep improving on all of the species, and they've got their own software. They just do it all in Python. So every group has their own specialty stuff, but they seem to be pretty amazing at it. So yeah, we're ticking along with that, and I mean, if we had the money, we'd be. I think we're particularly focused on nocturnal things at the moment. I think a lot of groups are doing all sorts of things, so we keep everybody is jumping on this bandwagon at the moment, and they're all doing it in different ways. But we're just ticking along with this really well established software at the moment, working with the BTO, and that's working brilliacently well for us.
Yeah, no, it's a really exciting project, and bioacoustics is becoming a really cost-effective way of carrying out surveys, I think. So
and look, you know, I mean, we're picking up the bitterns. You know, I mean, it's not been millions of them, but we are. You know, the amount of reporting and monitoring so far in Tasmania has been quite small, and so there's been this estimate that there's, you know, fewer than 80 in the whole of the state. And you know, I think we probably need to do a fair bit more effort to be confident around that number. I'm hopeful that it's an underestimate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a great believer in that. If there's suitable habitat, it's quite likely that the birds are there, or the lizards or the frogs or whatever. It's quite likely that they're there. They haven't been seen, but if they're vocalizing, we can at least get reliable data that they are present. It doesn't give us a population size or anything like that, but then it is effective way to use the funding to pinpoint locations where there has been an audio record, and then go and find a visual and photographic record, and then go back and rinse and repeat.
Yeah. And it is so exciting. Like with eagles, I always say, if you look up in the sky long enough, anywhere in Tasmania, you will see an eagle, except on King Island. But with the bitterns, like, you know, it's really exciting. If you, I mean, it's such a cool call anyway, the boom. It's really exciting, and I hope that people will be really inspired to put recorders all over the place.
Sorry, I'm just checking. I just got a message, but it wasn't about this. It was about the budget. Someone's told me about the federal budget.
Let's focus on something happier.
Okay, well, let's veer off. I mean, we've casually spoken about the work that James Pay has been doing with GPS tracking of particular eagles. Give us an update on what James has been doing with the Tas wedge-tails.
Oh gosh, well, I would love you to ask him yourself, but I will.
I've reached out many times. James is a very busy person, so I have reached out several times.
Yeah, so he's got. I think we've got the number on our website. I think it might even be more now. He's got around 55 different wedge-tailed eagles with these phenomenal tags on them. There might be a picture again if you go back to that website and you go to news, there might be a picture or two.
I'm just looking for the
just the news.
There we are. That's the one.
Yeah,
that's the one. So.
Yeah, and they're about the size of a large matchbox, but much flatter with a solar. There you go. Yeah, solar panel on them. And yeah, it's basically a little mobile phone in there with a GPS that every 24 hours, assuming they're in coverage, they'll shoot off details of their location. And the ones he's most recently been using are tracking where they are every 6 seconds, along with altitude. It's just amazing. And this is having not been able to radio track them at all until James started this stuff. So it's phenomenal. Because, as I say, it's so tantalizing because you can't watch them at the nest or anything. And this is really, really helping with our understanding of what they get up to. He started off actually tagging fledglings, which he did incredibly carefully with all sorts of special care around the nests. And so that was really interesting to see how long the eagles were staying at the nests. And now he's doing a lot with adults. And he's able to do a lot of modeling. He's working on that now to try and understand where the riskier areas are for things like wind farms and electrical infrastructure, so that they can prioritize, like with the electrical infrastructure, they can prioritize where they put things like flappers to draw attention to lines, and maybe areas where they might avoid putting up power lines if they can.
We're just having a look at the video at the moment that the data that James
sorry, I'm just chatting away. I've seen a lot of times, but it's phenomenal, isn't it? It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And it's not only the direction and the actual track that the bird takes while flying, it's the altitude, but also the velocity. So you get an idea of how fast. So that lets you understand what the bird is doing.
Exactly.
So what the behaviour is, and just
that's right. Yeah. So like whether they're just perching and minding their own business, or whether they're at high risk. Yeah.
Yeah, and why this work is really important, because we're talking about wedge-tailed eagles in Tasmania, but the technique can be used for things like brolgas that are getting hit in southwestern Victoria with wind farms, and pelicans and egrets and all sorts of other raptors. It may not be the exact same unit that is appropriate for each one of these species, but the methodology is proven now. And if James is working on modelling, well, then it opens up to a whole lot more species, not only in Australia. I mean, of course, it's the old standing on the shoulders of giants. People are learning so much.
James is mathematically fantastic and really has embraced lots of new approaches. And he's doing a fantastic job at really trying to get his head around what these birds are doing. It's been awesome.
Well, it's pioneering work, and I reckon it's probably been pretty lonely work too, because it's very difficult to be putting trackers on birds that don't like to be anywhere near people. Right?
Well, so he's not working alone. So right now he's out with an American researcher, Todd Katzner, who actually was involved in designing those trackers, and his colleague Jason Wiersma of the Forest Practices Authority has been doing an amazing job doing a lot of that tough work of trapping the eagles, the adult ones particularly, to get the trackers on. So he's not alone. He's not alone.
Can you imagine the first time you trap and handle a wedge-tailed eagle? I mean, that must be. Yeah,
he's got a few photos of that. He's told with great relish that he's basically got the bird it takes up his whole trunk, and it's sort of up to about there, and then goes far down. He's kind of holding the thing, and he said that he's quite often had his nipple nibbled by the bill, but that is trivial because he's really focused on the talons, because that's the really scary thing. I would have thought that the nipple part was really bad too, but he said that's not what he's worried about. But it's immense. I mean, it's such a big bird,
and I don't think they're known for being particularly placid while being handled. So I think
Yeah, I think
I'll
the way
have
you
to.
handle that. But yeah, you can put on the
Hood.
eye
Yeah,
covering, and
yeah,
that really helps. Yeah.
yeah. Certainly have to keep on getting the first-hand conversation about all of this work.
But
I'm just in awe of it.
the other thing that's really exciting from the Wedgie perspective, or the kind of understanding about the numbers, is that we can look at the territory size, and we can look at the degree of overlap. And so that's not going to help us so much. The numbers of young birds may come and go, but we can sort of see how the territory size relates to the available habitat, and just learn a lot more about how they fit into the environment, which will really help. It's not the only method that we'll use, but it'll be super useful to see. There's always a speculation about, well, how many can you actually fit in Tasmania?
Yeah, and not only just Tasmania as a whole, but there's different qualities of habitat. So
well, exactly. So you could change that potentially, theoretically.
Yeah, yeah. So you're getting an idea, I guess, where there's adjoining territories. You getting an idea of whether they are adjoining where, over poorer habitat or where good habitat occurs, and whether there's competition within that space. But you need all of that spatial distribution and frequency information. There's all different data sets that you need to be able to pull any of those.
And the other thing is, so for years and years, we've been collecting dead eagles, and I mean, it has been really informative. Like, that was what really alerted us to the fact that these new rodenticides are really bad news, even for eagles, which don't even eat rats, but it's obviously going up through the system. And there's an issue with lead, so that was really informative. But with his tagged eagles, there's no bias. Like, you're not only looking, at roadsides or in particular places. You're just tracking what happens to the birds he's tagged. So we'll have an unbiased source of information about the sources of mortality and hopefully even injury, which is completely gold.
So, what kind of an impact do you think Wedgie and as a corollary, James's work and everyone collaborating with James has had on the understanding of the function and the place of the wedge-tailed eagle in the Tasmanian ecosystem in the wider community? Like, local reporters and the ABC and just general, when people are talking about conservation issues in mainstream media, are all of those myths about the wedge-tailed eagle being a key predator of new lambs and all that, has that all been washed away yet?
Yes, when you started talking, I was thinking, oh, what's the data? Well, we haven't analysed that. We have got some data, but I haven't, got enough to report on. I mean, if I go to something like AgFest, I'm not sure if the people who hate eagles are veering off. It's quite possible. But I've had an awful lot of people pretty much thumping on the table, farmers going, eagles do not eat lambs. And I'm like, okay. And that isn't true. They particularly young ones, I think, when they're absolutely desperate, they'll find somewhere where it's really easy to knock off some lambs. Maybe they're all, a little bit weak or whatever. But we wouldn't deny that it happens, but it's not particularly common. And my perception is that people are reasonably clear on that in Tassie. But I mean, you'll always get some people who've been raised to think that birds like that are vermin. Well, maybe you won't always get it, but that's still something that exists, that perception. But my very tentative impression is that is quite reduced now. Yeah, every year we get a lot of reporting about where we're Wedgie, and of course there's great interest in James's project, so that's putting eagles in a really positive light. There's an awful lot of people that still, despite my efforts, still don't realize about things like the nests. I think a lot of real well-wishers who are perhaps, as you said, very accustomed to the nesting habits of mainland eagles. They just can't quite believe that that's such a big deal in Tasmania. But yeah, we're chipping away at all that sort of thing, and when we're like sending out all the massive socials and things, we can keep banging on about that, and people's use of rodenticides and so on and so on.
Rodenticides. Do you think? I mean, this is something we talk about a lot on the show too. The progress in that seems action for having them withdrawn from retail sale is glacial. Do you think there's an understanding in? I mean, you were out at AgFest and you're probably talking to farmers more often than I am these days. Do you think there's an understanding?
No, I think we've got a long way to go. Yeah. And you just see in Bunnings, Landcare Tasmania has been doing an amazing job. They've got some really good pages informing on what to look for. Basically, you're looking to see whether the whole thing is described with caution or with poison. If it says poison, don't use it, which is, quite a persuasive set of logic. Because the poison is the second generation stuff and caution is the first generation stuff. I love that. But no, I was chatting to people in AgFest and people really didn't know that. I think we've got a long way to go still, and the fact, I was really kind of banging on about this fact that eagles aren't known to eat rodents. So if it's in them, and it was in, I wrote this down actually in case we had it in, when James did his analysis, he was seeing rodenticide residues in 74% of the 50 eagles he looked at. So, in varying degrees, but perhaps, maybe actually killing some of them, but it may also be, causing them to be clumsy and bump into things, which is a big issue, with infrastructure and so forth. Yeah, but you just think, my God, we know it's affecting owls, and you just think, well, what else is it affecting? We know it gets into reptiles. Sounds like it could potentially be really permeating through the ecosystem. It's awful.
It's disappointing. I was at Bunnings yesterday, and I had to go and buy some nuts and bolts. But while I was there, I wanted to check out.
Get the right ones, like you would do. Bunnings, but I always get the wrong. They're always on the wrong thing. The wrong one.
I used to work at Bunnings in an earlier life, and I know that if you can't find what you want, you go straight to someone and you say, "Hey, this is what I need." I always take what I need, and I go, "I need 10 of these."
Well, then you have to look in each box because it's on. Anyway, sorry.
No, I make it their problem. I say, "Can you find them for me? I'm going out into the garden to pick up something else." But anyway, that's the way I go. But
to do a little bit for call trackers.
But I was very disappointed because I thought, well, I think we first spoke about rodenticides about 4 years ago on the bird emergency. I think it'd be nearly 4 years ago. And I went to the indoor gardening specialist, and I said, which is the I've got some mice and some rats at home, but I want the one that is safe for owls and for hawks and things. Absolutely no clue. And I was under the impression that there was training happening and that the suppliers were doing in-store training for the staff. Well, not in the couple of times that I've gone to Bunnings and a couple of the other stores and actually just played dumb and said, "I would like this please." which surprises me because when I worked at Bunnings, we did a lot of in-store training for all sorts of chemicals, which ones were the most effective, killing aphids and slaters, and there was no amount of effort spared to demonstrate and tell us which ones to recommend. But
well, I don't know. I mean, obviously that's N equals 1. I don't know if you like giving your viewers a little project of each going into Bunnings and then saying on social media, "Oi, Bunnings!" if they don't get a good response.
We have talked about it before. I mean, I've reached out to the industry body to have people come and talk about it. I know I've talked about this with Holly and some other people about what kind of consumer action is effective. I'm not sure if telling Bunnings they're very bad on social media works. I think it's just better to be showing, hey, I went to Bunnings today and I could have bought this, but instead I bought this. And do you know why I did buy this? It's because this doesn't kill owls and falcons and eagles. So I think we have to be positive like that, and then we have to encourage consumers to...
I don't know, maybe I'm old-fashioned in remembering the Green Consumer Guide from my teens, but the sort of idea that you go, "Oh, Bunnings, I was going to buy some stuff from you, but I saw that you did this, and I was a bit disappointed, so I went somewhere else."
Yeah, I think that kind of works, but I also think that Bunnings have kind of made their choice. I think I don't know. I'd like to speak to some.
I'm no expert, so that's just my. I'm as well.
I'd like to get a sense of it from some retail sort of, and marketing expert and some social media expert. But my experience for having worked at Bunnings is if there's $1 in it, we'll sell it. And I think it needs to be consumer led if it's to be a voluntary withdrawal. If the veterinary medicines regulatory authority or whatever they're called, if they don't force them, and I don't think they will, because I think the ag market will still want access to,
and that's fine. They could just have a permit. It's frustrating, but I understand what you're saying. They want to do that without any faff.
Yeah, it's I don't know. What? Tell us what you reckon, folks, in the comments. Tell us what you reckon would be an effective direct action methodology to implement when you go into a big box hardware store. It's not only big box hardware stores too. I must say that Woolies and Coles, certainly in my area, are stocking, but they're stocking and making prominent the right chemicals now, or the right rodenticides. Now, I'm not sure that is everywhere, because they do often implement different strategies and ranging decisions in different kind of stores. But maybe they're testing it out. Maybe they know where I live and that they.
I was going to say.
Well, I do frequently go to the service desk and go, "Hey, how come you're doing this?" Because sometimes that feedback is better. I mean, if you just go and do that, and I don't rant and rave, I go, "Hey, do you know this stuff kills owls and this stuff doesn't?" And also go to their garden products. Do you know this stuff is deadly for frogs? And sort of go, "Oh, no." I go, "Well, could you let your manager know, and could you tell your, your group salesperson that this stuff's terrible?" And, sometimes they just do the right thing. Shelf space in supermarkets is like gold. So, so there's always another product waiting to take the place of something. So, anyway, there we go. We've talked so much about owls, and now tell me, Claire, I can't let you go without getting an idea of how you are seeing the big picture in Tasmania. I mean, we've got a couple of icon species, swift parrot, obviously, OBP, 40-spot pardalote. What's your gut feeling on how these difficult birds and endangered species are faring these days?
Well, I mean, actually, the OBPs seem to be doing, the orange-bellied parrots seem to be doing really well. So that's been amazing, because for a long time it felt like the funding there was like, it was substantial, but it was never enough. So it was like a gesture to kind of just shut people up. So that was really upsetting. Whereas now it's looking to be like truly effective. So that's wonderful. The swift parrots, I'm not seeing the same action at all. I'm finding that really upsetting to see. Yeah, there's a lot of keenness to just go, well, you know, it's all the sugar gliders, and I don't think it's that straightforward. And
yeah, well,
it's that weird thing.
It never is.
Going to say, let's just forget about them because it's the sugar gliders. Nobody's going to say that. So let's get on with doing things right rather than just kind of la 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 la.
Yeah, and I mean that's been pretty phenomenal work to actually discover the problem with predation by sugar gliders, but
it is just one of the problems. I mean, like, they're definitely not going to recover if we keep hacking away at their habitat.
No, well,
and it's not a huge amount of habitat either. It's really tough to see.
Well, it's tempting to sort of think, well, if they need hollows, let's provide nest boxes, right? And we know that there's maybe 80 years, maybe 150 years to replace hollows that are being lost. But it's never ever that simple, is it? Like,
I mean, it's particularly not simple with Swifties because you don't know exactly where they're going to end up each year. So you have to sort of hurtle in there with the right boxes. If you do have a predation issue in certain areas, then that's problematic. But yeah, I mean, you just don't know where they're going to end up. So it is a little bit, yeah, it's not that simple. People have talked about nest boxes forever, and I know that ANU did experiment with them a bit, but it doesn't seem to be something that's working well as a strategy. Very frustrating.
No, I mean, Swifties are probably the most difficult of the difficult birds, I think.
Pretty damn difficult
at present. Yeah. Yeah. Claire, outreach and awareness. Have we, in conservation generally, what's your gut feeling about? And this leans back to that point you made about governments don't act until it's a pain point in the community. And I'm always looking at surveys that tell us that conservation seems to be a priority for 75 roundabout. That seems to be a consistent number, 75% of the community. But I don't think the surveys are ever done in a way that tells us where it ranks, where conservation, where it ranks compared to the cost of my rent, the cost of my mortgage, i.e. interest rates, how much broccoli has gone up in price, all those kind of issues. Do you have a gut feeling, because you're, sort of front facing with talking to students? Obviously they're sort of already self-selecting for being interested. But you're out and about. You probably talk to, a wider range of people than I do, I would guess. Do you think conservation is becoming a top order, and conservation / biodiversity protection?
I don't know. I mean, I'm seeing it through the lens so much of my own feelings right now. And,
Yeah.
everything just feels a bit grim. As you said, all of those tough things. So then each time you see that post going, oh, this is awful too, it's hard to read. I mean, it's literally hard to go, I ought to understand this, so I'm going to read this article. I mean, I've reached out quite a lot to media talking about some other issues, like with burrowing crayfish. That's our other project. I mean, just, really awful things are going on there. And, that's not a particularly immediately sexy bunch of species. So that could be an issue. But I think I think particularly adding new information about yet more awful things, I think people are struggling to hear it. I mean, of course, if you can kind of go, please do this thing, it's going to make a difference. That's nice. But I think people are just struggling under the weight of so much stuff at the moment. I don't know. That's, sorry to be grim, but that's just my. Well, I'll see in a month's time, and maybe I'll say it differently. It's winter at the moment.
Yeah. Can I maybe open the discussion up a little bit, because this issue is a really difficult one for people who are involved in, science communication. And I think particularly people involved in ecology and conservation work, because on the one hand, we're always being told nobody wants to hear bad messages. Always try and make something positive. Always make something positive. And while I generally agree with that, I also think, hey, I can't stomach another segment on Sunrise, right, with a really well-respected conservationist or scientist, whoever it may be, doing a feel-good story about something, but then the conversation never, ever goes into any difficult territory. And I reckon we've failed, and I'd really like your thoughts on this. I think we've been led down the path of letting the interest groups and also the media generally, because a lot of the people you're talking to in media are not really on top of the issues. There's only a few of the real specialist reporters who are. I think we've let the conversation become, if we do climate action, that will fix all the other things. And I think we're being led with the nature positive thing and carbon credits and private money and all this. We're being led into a situation where they're going to look like they're doing a lot, because we are not, every time we have a discussion, saying, hey, climate action and carbon reduction is not biodiversity protection, right? We need specific action and specific programs for skates and burrowing crayfish and frogs and lizards and swift parrots and grevilleas. And because one stick of vegetation, planting 1 million trees is not the same as preserving 1 million plants in functional, valuable habitat. And I think we're letting the discussion always go that way. You just have to Google for looking for good news. I often Google good news conservation, good news environment. And it'll be about establishing monocultures in the trees that they're planting to support forestry in Africa and in parts of Asia and in, parts of Europe. And that's not biodiversity preservation at all.
No, I mean, you could definitely celebrate when you do see something good, where they're not doing monocultures and they are actually doing everything all at once. They're like, planting more trees, but they're actually the right habitat and blah, blah, blah. But I follow a lot of podcasts on climate change and such like, because I'm exactly curious about this. How do you you've got to acknowledge there have been some good things with this government, and because it was pretty awful before. And, it seems a bit churlish to say, oh yeah, you've done that, but it's not nearly enough. You've got to sort of acknowledge you've done something. It's a really delicate path to tread, isn't it?
But Claire, I think you're letting them off a little bit easy because...
Oh no, I'm not going to let them off. It's just a question of how do you manage that message so that
because they set the expectations.
Yeah.
They said they were going to fix the laws, and that was the key thing.
Yeah, no, that
was to drive the strategy. They set the bar up here. I didn't set it for them. I cried with joy on election night. I did a live stream, and I said we're finally going to see something. Tanya Plibersek told me that, right?
Yeah, but did you?
Oh, well, I believed it. I took it on face value. I believe she was the nice lady from Sydney who really cared, and that it was really important.
I'm really glad that they've got the Deputy Prime Minister on this, and there is some stuff happening. But for sure, I mean, yeah, I don't know.
And let me clarify. I think they're going to be spectacularly successful eventually in reducing our carbon emissions and tackling climate change. I think in terms of the world, I don't think they're going to do it in 5 years, but I think if they get another term, I think we'll see really significant changes there. And I'm prepared to give them a massive big tick if they do that. But I think they're going to launder that as being a success for the environment, right?
Yeah, and I completely agree with you that, like, that's so much about the messaging. That's like, yeah, if you keep telling people we're doing the right thing and this is going to fix everything, then unless there's a bunch of the rest of us going, then people, I mean, you want to believe that.
I want it to be true. Like I always say, I want everything to be fixed tomorrow, and I would like to see them say one less submarine or 10 less tanks or whatever. I mean, where I got really cynical is they magicked up $50 billion for the Defence Forces after they'd just been telling us that the AUKUS commitment would make it so difficult. There's just no money out there for anything. We can't put the dole up. We can't possibly help the poorest people in the country, but at the same time, we can subsidise the wages for aged care workers in privately owned healthcare facilities, aged care facilities. We can't find any money to monitor. We can't find any money to monitor the projects that we have already funded in the threatened species area. Can't find that money. But we just found $50 billion for defence.
I know, and yet that would just nail everything. That sort of money.
I mean, I actually did work it out. I haven't got it in front of me, but I worked out how many PhDs that 50 billion we could run over the next 20 years.
Well, I think I may have told you I followed the technique developed by the New Zealand government with Hugh Possingham and Liana Joseph. We did this in the Tasmanian government in 2010. We costed out how much it would cost to secure 170, the endangered and vulnerable species that were purely Tassie's problem that we could fix without worrying about whatever anybody else did. And it basically, if you did everything, it was going to be like $1 million a year. It wasn't that much.
I really don't want to get off on a rant because
you can Google that, by the way. If anybody's listening, look up prioritization threatened species Tasmania, and you can see the whole thing.
I'll find it and link. Actually, I know I already wrote it down there, but I will.
I mean, for sure, it needs updating, and it could have been better. But my God, it would have made a difference.
But this is where I get kind of annoyed. I mean, didn't they just find? Look, I'll have to check the money, but they've actually found money in the budget to give to Gina Reinhardt for one of her climate-friendly solutions. So she's the richest person in the country. I don't know why the government is giving her any money. Give her a tax break for doing the good work, but we don't need to incentivise the richest person in the country to do something good. Oh, what's the cat's name?
It's an indoor cat. It's an indoor cat.
Yeah. I know you've got an indoor cat.
Hi. Shut up.
Oh, did you put the cat out? I was going to say let's have pet time. Now, wait there. You haven't met my new housemate. I'm just going to get my new housemate. Just wait there, everybody.
Oh yes, I have seen.
It's Loz. Loz has come to join us. So actually, let's go to this. If I go to here, we'll get a better view of Loz. There we are.
Oh, we only see bits of him, but yeah, he's gorgeous.
Yeah, that's right. Because the green screen, he disappears. Now he's on the mic arm. I haven't got his playpen in here, so he'll be on the screen and he'll probably land on the lights and everything. So yeah. So in some context, a very annoying bird, but yeah. If you've seen Loz, have you heard the story about how Loz he actually turned up on a live stream on New Year's Eve? He turned up. My housemate was outside, and Loz landed on our window, on the windowsill, and I'm live streaming, talking to people about, probably on a rant about something. And my housemate's gone, oi, rainbow lorikeet on the windowsill. I said, what are you talking about? I thought, what are you talking about? Anyway, he said, look. And Loz was running around on the lawn, following him around. Obviously a pet.
Yeah.
Lost. You going to tell us anything today, Loz? If he gets excited, he'll tell us both that he loves us. And so, yeah, but he's in good nick now. But when it's taken 4 or 5 months to really get into condition, and I've had to buy him a Taj Mahal to live in. Of course. And he spends most of his time just hanging out with me. So here he comes. Here he is. Oh, yeah. Where are you going?
Any idea how old?
Anyway. No, he hasn't. I took him to the vet just to see if there was a chip, or anything, so we could look for an owner, and checked all the Facebook and all that, Gumtree and everything. So we haven't found an owner, but I haven't taken him down to the specialist vet yet to have his blood testing done for beak and feather disease, and to get his DNA checked. I want to get him onto George Ola's database. So there we are. That's his favourite spot on top of my head, picking at the headphones. He likes picking.
That's very charming.
There we go. I didn't want to bring him in while we were doing the proper interview, but now that we're sort of winding down, we can have a bit of fun, and Loz can join in. Folks, I'll let you know too if you've got a question or a comment or something that you would like to ask Claire. It's a good opportunity to do that now. I'm just checking on the Twitter whether any of the X's or the Twitters have tagged me and said anything. No, Bronwyn Fredericks has just liked the Where Wedgie post. So if you're listening, Bronwyn, and you've got anything you would like to ask, it's a good time to do that now.
Like I do think it is quite I've been sort of trying to reach out a bit to Tourism Tasmania, because I do think it's quite a nice way. I mean, it certainly gets people moving around intrastate. You can just pick some really, I mean, just picking somewhere really random is really fun. I think it was a couple of years ago, I was buzzing around and I was doing my 6 10-minute surveys. That's the structure. And I was just like, oh, okay, well, this looks like a good place to just stop. And I'll stop here. And I kind of got out of the car quickly. Oh, I'm just behind time. Start my 10 minutes. And this flood of peacocks came from the neighbouring property and just surrounded me completely, the whole car. It was so random. And you get a lot of funny experiences like that. It's quite good. And then also, of course, like just astounding views. And yes, I think I've got some really nice pictures of some sulphur-crested at the end of the day from this trip, which I'll have a look at and maybe post.
Do you get sulphur-cresteds coming into your deck?
A little bit. They've just started appearing. So I'm a little bit up the mountain, Konani, Mount Wellington, and we've lived here for 20 years, and just the last year or two, they've just started appearing.
Now, Stan on Kangaroo Island
yes.
TV, just said, hey all, I was sad to see a big wedgie run over and killed on the Nullarbor last month. On a more positive note, the Kangaroo Island wedgies are doing well. Well, that's good news.
I'd love to know how many, roughly how many there are altogether. I mean, something really amazing that we've actually got on our website in that news page is the story of Ernie, the wedge-tailed eagle. So that was one of James's birds. It is. So he was born on Maria Island, which is a really small island. And, we talk about the fact that, well, why are they genetically different, or do they appear to be genetically different or whatever in Tasmania? Because they're soaring, they really need those thermals. They hate flying over any sort of water. And Ernie, the fledgling on tiny Maria Island off the east coast, he didn't cross for, I think it was at least 2 years. This tiny body of water, very nervous. So it'd be interesting to know if the King Island ones are similarly very confined to, Kangaroo Island, whether they move at all or if they're very immobile.
I do love all the shots, all the photos on the.
I'm really glad.
Nature Tracker's website. It's terrific. Give you a sense of what Tasmania looks like. We probably should give a shout out to the people that support the Nature Trackers work, Claire.
Absolutely.
Tasmanian Community Fund.
Yeah, so they gave us very substantial establishment funds. They're no longer funding us, but they definitely deserve to stay on for a bit longer because that was very substantial.
And is that a fund that has come out of gaming revenue? Is that
no? Oh goodness, I'm going to get it wrong. There's a very particular history about the source of that money. It was from selling something in government quite some time ago.
Okay, well let's not get it wrong.
Things like funding, toilets for a sports club or all sorts of things. Huge range of community stuff.
Pennicott Foundation.
So the Bookend Trust's charitable status comes from the Pennicott Foundation. So that's Rob Pennicott does all the boat rides, and he's created a foundation that supports all sorts of things. And the Bookend Trust is their environmental arm.
Good on you, Rob. If you want to sponsor a podcast, I'm ready, willing, and available. Tas Networks, so I'm guessing that's the distribution, electrical distribution company.
They do all the kind of structure-y stuff. And obviously they're really concerned about eagles crashing into power lines and getting electrocuted.
A logical partner, so good on them.
Yeah, and they work closely with us and talk to us a lot, and benefit obviously from and fund and benefit from James's work. So we have a close relationship, talking to them about how they manage around their eagles.
Very good. University of Tasmania.
So that's more like, I have an office there, and we just have a lot of close relationships and collaborations there.
You've probably got a landline there too.
No, I do not have a landline.
You don't have a landline at the University of Tasmania.
I
Oh,
do.
so
I'm not sure if anyone does now. Yeah, maybe.
wow, that's really moving ahead. They've taken all the landlines out of university offices. Tasmanian government, obviously,
Yes.
that's very good.
Yeah, no, I mean, they've been very supportive and done active stuff with us in the past. I think mainly at the moment it's more kind of like just supporting, encouraging others to do it.
Lending staff to you and lending the expertise
spreading
of
the
staff.
word.
Yeah. So that's good. Allowing staff to talk to you, because they often governments don't allow their staff to talk to anyone. So
there's a lot of interest in eagles, so everyone talks to everyone as much as possible.
Yeah. And a really important partner, I would imagine, is ESC mapping and GIS for this geospatial stuff.
Update that logo. They're now called ESC Spatial, and they have been the guys that did the app for that maintained and created the app for us. And the fact that they're real mapping specialists is good, because it's all about the map for us. Yeah.
Excellent. Now, which is the link for the newsletter, Claire?
Subscribe. Where it says subscribe.
I thought it was. I was right there, ready to go. So there we go. Oh, and that's with that's a cool photo. Oh, there we go. It's just landed on the screen. Good on you.
So yeah, there's emails, and obviously we have no. We would always welcome more volunteer time or funds or so forth.
Yeah, excellent. Terrific. No, that's great. Well, Claire, is there anything else that we need to talk about that I've forgotten to get you to tell me?
I think I've slithered all sorts of bits and pieces in there. Thank you for so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about it. I would just emphasize it would be if anybody knows anyone that'll be in Tasmania, not this weekend but next weekend, and might enjoy doing this sort of thing, we definitely need a fair few more surveys. So we're at that pointy end at the moment where we definitely need some more bookings. So yeah, it's fun, and it really helps. It really helps guide conservation. So if you know anyone that might be up for it, please spread the word.
Well, Claire, you have a standing invitation. Anytime you've got any news about burrowing crayfish, wedge-tailed eagles, corellas, cockatoos, anything anything, and particularly anytime you've got an update, like when you've got results to put out, just tap me and we can talk about it. And I'm really interested to follow how the bioacoustic project goes. I mean, especially, I mean, bats miss out, and sometimes people are telling me, Grant, just talk about birds. Stop talking about other stuff.
Oh, mate.
Well, I'm thinking of actually doing, another emergency channel, sort of carried on the side of this, so that I can start talking about.
Remember Bird of the Year in New Zealand?
Well, I didn't bring it up, but I've got a request in, and we've had to reschedule with Nicola Tokai from, or I don't know if it's Tokai or Toki, from Forest and Bird in New Zealand, and we played yesterday some of the statements from the ministers there on this fast track legislation. I'm terrified that we'll get similar kind of legislation dressed up here as some kind of trade-off for climate action, that I'm just terrified that kind of stuff will happen here. Certainly, I think if we have a different colour government after the next election, I've got no doubt that New Zealand, I mean, they're doing the same thing. The Tories are doing the same thing in the UK, and the same consulting firms work for the Conservatives in all the countries, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and the UK. So there's no doubt we'll get similar kind of rubbish. So, I mean, we have to be careful and strategic. We have to make sure that we don't get a completely anti-nature government, but we need a government that does better and keeps their promises. So
the right wing doesn't have to be anti.
they don't have to be anti-nature,
No, I mean,
but
I don't know if you know, but for
but
all
that's
this,
who they are.
Actually snuck in loads of really good environmental and climate-related things. There's a lot of very conservative people who are also conservationists, but they've been a bit thin on the ground in recent times.
Yes, sorry. Well, Loz has just decided that there's not enough to keep him interested. He needs to get on the keyboard. So, which is, I don't have his playpen. Normally, I've got a playpen here, and he's off on that. But he's got, unless he goes into my cupboard, he'll be very, very bored. So yeah, Claire, do. I mean, let's do it again. I mean, is this number 3? I think this is number 3 for you.
Yep.
So you become friend of the show and you get to get a T-shirt when I finally get them here. I've got this great friend of the show T-shirt that I've had designed. I just haven't had them printed up and sent out. So yeah, but that'll come. That'll happen before your fourth one.
That's great.
Tasmanian Land Council, is that still doing great things?
Land Conservancy, TLC.
Land Conservancy, sorry.
Oh yeah, going from strength to strength. They've got a big campaign out at the moment for something called Pine Tier, huge area that will connect up some other areas. Yeah, they're doing really well. Doing lots of monitoring as well, which is nice. Like it's tenure specific. It's not like the whole of the state, but yeah, they're going from strength to strength.
Yeah, no, I must follow up. It's it's years since I've spoken to anyone about it. Biodiversity Council's been a positive,
yes, definitely
thing here in sort of nationally. So that's
100%.
That's been good. Any other Tasmania specific, good news stories?
I mean, I just think, and I don't exactly know. I need to ask them a bit more. I think my experience at this end, and I don't know if it's happening all over the country, I just sense that there's a bit more collaboration happening. So the worst thing in the world, I think the most damaging thing, was we were all kind of scratching each other's eyes out for money, and we were all doing something similar, and then, because the money was there to do that thing, so we'd always be trying to do the thing and competing with each other. Whereas I think there's a bit more of an effort now to work together, which is just fundamental. We need to do it so badly. It's just sometimes it's the way the funding works that you just it's very difficult to do that. But I see an improvement there. Working on that positivity. I'm not always very good at it, but
yeah, I always feel like I should do a better job of networking and getting people involved. I'd love to do regular panels where I get people in with similar interest areas and crossover and talking about general issues. So I think that's the kind of thing I want to take off this channel onto another sort of pipeline and see if we can get that going, because there's so many people doing great things. And I mean, it's always been for me, Claire, and why I really appreciate your outreach, that you're always spreading the word outside of the bubble, outside of the beltway, and I think that's what we have to be doing. So
yeah, and I mean, everyone's got different approaches. My personal one is to be super apolitical. I keep asking people about what the right thing to do is, and I don't know, but our approach is to try and reach everyone and not to create rifts, but to create people coming together for the love of whatever it is, the eagle, nature, everything.
There's enough people like me out there creating rifts and making waves, I think, Claire. So now, if you want to catch up with Claire, you can follow Nature Trackers on X/Twitter, or just go to naturetrackers.au. And of course, for me, I would like you to subscribe to the birdemergency.com/YouTube, or at Bird Emergency on the Twitter X shithole thing that it has become. Claire, we'll say Uru to the audience. Now, thanks everyone for joining me on the Bird Emergency again. It's great seeing all the live people in the chit chat. And do follow Claire. I'll provide the links so you can find everything you need to when you need to. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.